got daisies and unicorns, and here we are in the Infinity Season 8. And this is episode number 3, everybody. So, Infinity plus 3.
The Trinity of Infinity.
The Trinity of Infinity. That's good.
It's a triune infinite
And it rhymes, so you
cosmos.
know it's good. You know it's true.
Yeah.
Because it rhymes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's going on today?
Well, on an energy level, I feel like a 4.5 with a asterisk. I got a little bit of a headache going on, and I don't know if it has to do with the weather.
Wow. I wonder if it does, because Heather woke up. She's like, I have a headache. I'm like, wow, that was quick.
Oh, man. Yeah, so it's not as bad as it was when I was driving down, but yeah. I mean, it was just one of those things. I was like, well, how's my energy? And I'm like, well, it's almost 11 a.m. Mm-hmm. I've been up for 5 hours.
Right.
I mean, that's a lot of living life right there.
It's a lot of life to live in a day.
So, I checked a few things off my list. I didn't do any coke.
No other illicit drugs either.
No heroin.
Yeah.
No Molly.
Yeah.
Check. Weed? No, didn't do that either.
Yeah.
Have I had a drink yet today? Nope. So, you know what?
Substance free. Well,
no, that's not true.
No.
I got some coffee and nicotine in my system. Yeah, that's for sure. I got my Nick tabs in my pocket.
Right.
And yeah, so
yeah, it would be hard to be substance free.
Well, I think the Mormons try to do it.
Yeah.
And
I mean, they say they do it.
And
suspect.
Are Hindi people, are they not, or is it Muslim?
Yeah,
No alcohol. No alcohol.
I think Muslims are, they're, they don't drink, or at least they say they don't drink.
Well, I picked up on an episode of SEAL Team.
Mm-hmm.
There's a gentleman who was, they never really talked about him being Muslim, but anyway, but they were toasting a fallen brother, and the Bravo 1 was like, hey, you don't have to do this. And he's like, no, I'm part of this team, and, kind of a tribute. So, a breakable allowance, apparently. I don't know.
Well, I just think about and I know there's different, 150 plus types of Baptists, but the idea that, the Baptists were, teetotalers, right? They said they don't drink,
right?
But it was always like, well, we don't drink with other Baptists because then the law or legalities are going to apply to us, and then we'll feel bad. So we don't want to feel bad about ourselves, so we'll drink in quiet instead of.
Wow.
And I'm sure that there are good Baptists that are still out there who say they are teetotalers and actually tote the tea.
Yeah. Yeah, I grew up in a Baptist home, and so a hymnal lasts a fairly good amount of time, but in the front cover of the hymnal, they printed off the covenant of the church, so when you're a member.
Yeah.
And I remember times through my childhood where, like, the pastor would even say, okay, take out your hymnals and let's turn to the covenant and let's read this all together.
Yeah.
And so
it was a reminder of the accountability.
The things that you would do, what you wouldn't do. Yeah. Several things. Now, my dad really did follow many of those covenant promises. Yeah. And one that sticks out in my mind is, he took a pretty strong line stance on secret societies. And then but the one thing that my dad was just like, yeah, I don't care what the church says about this. was playing cards, but it even said, no face cards.
Huh.
And it's funny because I think that's where the gaming industry then struck gold. Is they're like, well, I mean, if there's a group of our society that won't use face cards, we'll just turn games that you play with face cards into colors and number cards, and you can, and so it's like, there's a loophole,
There's a loophole.
How many loopholes can we build? But
is it because of they always then associated face card playing with gambling? I mean, because there's lots of card games that you can play, like euchre, I know is a big Midwest thing.
Yeah.
And that's not gambling. And I mean, I guess you could gamble on anything, but.
Well, and I grew up in Michigan, and euchre's a huge game there. And it's funny because you've got, like house rules. It's like depending on what region, like different. I mean, euchre game rules are pretty consistent. Rook is a non-face card game that's much like euchre. But like then you'd have,
spades and
high low and like just all this different stuff, and like if you're going to shoot the moon, you have to do it. Blah blah blah. And it's been so long. I mean, I played a lot of that in college.
Yeah.
But
and you were allowed to.
Well, with non face card, things. But I mean, cards. I really think part of it initially at face value, every pun intended. At face value, the thing is, well, gambling. But then it would be easy to say, but we're not gambling. And I think it got back to like the meaning of the face cards and how face cards were used in spiritualism for reading people's, like their futures and like just like tarot cards are face cards too in a different way, and so there's meanings for the aces, the king, the queen, the jack, the joker, and all this stuff. I mean, like why can't we just play 21 or like, which like for most gamblers would be called blackjack. Right. Heading down the trail of you're going to hell, go fish,
Right.
Yeah,
to me, it goes back to like the puritanical parts, like every denomination, Christian especially, in that early 1900s was pretty much very just legalistic towards a whole bunch, right? No gambling. And then we're going to tell you what gambling is. I remember they would still say you shouldn't have life insurance because it was gambling. Because it's like you're putting money down saying eventually you're going to die and then we have to pay it off. That's gambling. And I'm we would never be able to consider, I mean, I guess, for a majority like that, this would be you gambling on your life, to be like, no, like life insurance is good for you to be able to protect your family.
Yeah.
But we wouldn't consider it gambling now. But it was part of that. So no gambling, and we're going to tell you what that looks like.
Yeah.
No going to the movies because the movies are going to corrupt you.
Right. Yeah.
And even if you're looking at the movies that were in that early era, there's not a lot of like corruption. I mean, I'm not an old movie buff, but
right.
But the thing, they're always looking at this corruption part about these things are going to corrupt you. Alcohol will corrupt you. Dancing is going to corrupt you. You pick. I mean, I'm sure that there was more things that they were also against. These are just like the big ones, right? No gambling, no smoking, no drinking.
Yeah.
or what'd you say? No smoking, no drinking, going with girls who do, or something.
Don't dance, don't drink, don't smoke, don't chew, and don't go with the girls who do.
There you go. I knew there was
Yeah.
there's an adage there.
Yeah.
Every good adage.
Yeah. I mean, it just is really, really interesting on, and there are groupings of people around the world, across the nation, who adhere to a code of morality, quote unquote. I think part of what, brings this up is, just coming off of the Grammys and, the outlash, two notable events that happened this week, just to bring it into perspective,
Right.
is, a Chinese surveillance balloon floats all across the United States, and finally, when it gets off the East Coast, it's safe enough to blow it up.
Right.
Okay. And so, oh my gosh, the memes that are going on around these surveillance balloons is hilarious. And then, then we have the Grammys on Sunday evening, and one of the acts there, which, I mean, I fully knew what to expect. I mean, when you've got people dressed in red and
the song is called Unholy.
right. And there's a red veil, and there's, I mean, the dude had a choker collar on with how hard is it to figure out what's coming, with that? And, I live a somewhat sheltered, naive life. I mean, at some level.
Yeah.
And, for the record, I've never seen any of the Shades movies. I mean, it's just not, I'm
Right.
like,
I haven't either.
well, and so people are like, well, I can't believe that they are promoting devil worship and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, and bondage and all of the other stuff that was the imagery of what they used. Mm-hmm. But you knew it was coming.
Right.
I mean, I remember doing Super Bowl football parties where at the church where I pastored, and we'd rent out the YMCA, the basketball courts, and it was just an activities night, and people brought food and, a place to invite your friends, and then we showed the Super Bowl on a big screen.
Yeah.
But again, when it came to the halftime show, it's rock and roll. And so we shut off the halftime show. Now, I think it ended up being a good thing, because I think it was the year that there was the outfit malfunction.
Justin Timberlake and
Was it
Janet Jackson.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So, anyway, I'm sure that there's something that was gained from not having that happen.
Right.
Yeah.
But I also, I mean, to me, it goes back to this this idea that one, I mean, we're looking at a very pop culture version of the devil, right? The red suit, the horns, and a pitchfork idea of which is never outlined in the scriptures ever, right?
Right.
Ever.
Not ever.
We've come up with this image.
Right.
And here's a good rule of thumb.
Okay.
If something offends you, turn it off.
Well, and that goes back to the shades.
Move on.
The shades of gray thing. If you know what's being advertised,
right,
from, I mean, whether it's an advertisement on TV, if it's a trailer that's put in your news feed, or I mean, just whatever, you have the ability to not take in that. You and I have talked before. I mean, we rarely would take in or watch spooky, ghost demonology, kind of movies and stuff like that. But but it's by choice of not, I know what that is. I'm not going to take it in, So,
right. That's the choice that every person has.
And in
There's
3 hours
content, will you consume it?
Right.
It's not for me.
Yeah. And so like you got a 3 hour show on TV going on. They're always prefacing as they're cutting to break of what's going to come up.
Mm-hmm.
And when the people who are performing Unholy come up, well, shut off the damn TV.
Right.
I probably shouldn't have sworn either, right? I did that on purpose.
Right.
That's to my point from our last episode concerning swearing and vulgarity.
But so I think that you're right. Some of those those topics come up based on like people getting outraged, like real serious. Like people are super outraged, and you're like, so like, what do you expect? I mean, these people aren't followers of Jesus. And so, like, why do you expect them to act like it? And you're like, so we expect the world to behave like we do.
It blows my mind. To me, it sounds like a pandemic of narcissism.
Yeah.
Oh, this is how I feel and what I believe, and so the whole world should revolve around me. Mm-hmm. Well, newsflash, it doesn't.
Yeah, it shouldn't be a newsflash, but you're right. Like, I mean,
and is it wrong to say, hey, I think my response in our home, our conversation around it was, gosh, it was just a really great experience to look in at culture and where culture is, and to be able to take the moments that moved us, to just be able to sit in that and recognize, well, hey, I mean, and we watched the Grammys. It's the second year in a row that we've done that as a family, and it was just great conversation and discussion through the whole evening. And I mean, now, would I wish that they would have focused a little more on the folk side of life? Yes, absolutely. That Brandy Carlisle didn't get to receive any Grammys on stage, that made my heart sad.
Right. And I think she got 3, right?
She did. Yeah. And, she got to perform live. I mean, so, that's cool. And to have her wife and children, and there's so when it goes to all that, and then I have musician friends on the other side of things that are like, yeah, that's so like not anything that we're ever going to be a part of or like that. Why would we waste the time? Well, if, it's called entertainment, and I mean, I vote with my dial every week when football's playing, and I don't watch it. It's a personal choice.
Right. Yeah, so what were some of the moving parts you liked?
I'm not going to hell because I don't watch football.
That's true.
I'm not going to heaven because I don't watch football either, So, why are we so consumed with our eternal destiny? I mean, as far as like making judgment about what's going to determine that or not.
Right.
Yeah. So, what was your question?
I was just, I meant, since you were talking about there were moving parts. So there were parts that you were moved by. So what were some of those parts of, since we're talking about the Grammys, bring it up.
Yeah. I think on a technology level, I thought that the 4K or 5K video imagery behind all of the artists was pretty spectacular. I did think that other than the idea of a billowing blob coming out of it, to me, I just thought, I'm not sure. Usually I would go to solution focus on, well, if you didn't like that, what would you like, right? If you're going to, or are you just going to bitch about something? Cool. Really? You're just going to bitch about it? I'm like, but I I really, from a technology standpoint, I really like that. What parts move me? There were parts. I think that just the idea of the people who were new in the game and they're breaking through and they're breaking out. Like I always like new artist of the year and how that, the stories behind that. I think the other part, which people may disagree with me on this view, but I think the celebratory parts of diversity that came out, and some people may view it as propaganda. I mean, and whether you're talking about people of color or you're talking about sexual orientation or you're talking about gender identification. I mean, those are the three top diversity elements.
Right.
I thought that the institution of and celebration of the hip hop 50-year anniversary, and having watched some documentaries on, just everything that was going on, and the idea, like out of Compton and all of these places and what it meant for people to be able to fight with melody and words for a voice. And, and again, I mean, as much as demonism is one thing, there's, another side of saying, well, all those people in hip hop, they're thugs and they're they use drugs. And, well, I mean, Harry Styles was high. I mean, when he went up to present, I'm just like, or he accepted, maybe it was the first award he got. Yeah. I'm like, oh, that dude, and that's not drunk high. He's on. But then he went to perform, and I'm like, wow. So whatever he's on, he's used to performing, being on that.
Yeah. Well, he says he microdoses, but I also don't know if he's, and it's microdosing usually is shrooms.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like that, he's been apparently open about. So
yeah, but
also like that performance, he apparently like the way that they rehearsed it and practiced it, that thing that was turning, they turned it in the wrong direction, so all the dancers were backwards on, like, so it threw them off, for sure. So
yeah. Well, I thought that and that was the thing, is with the turning table and how everybody was moving through that whole thing. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh, wow. Well, he's on something, but he can still do whatever he's doing. I mean, not only is he singing the word, melodies and the words, but right. I mean, there's some synchronization going on.
Moving parts.
Yeah. And, I was sharing with you, Emma, like Lizzo, I'm not a fan.
Yeah.
I understand her soapbox. She's got a beautiful voice, and that she would use her voice for, and I guess that's the part that I can appreciate. I can appreciate the part where, and I think that's the part that moved me. Mm-hmm. All of these parts are some of a whole of me saying part for infinity.
Yeah.
But the idea, and I use the comparison. I'm like, listen, does she have a voice equal or comparable to Whitney Houston? The answer is no. I mean, Whitney's,
I think she's probably unmatched.
1% of 1%, and so with that, on the flip side, when I listened, I was like, yeah, but gosh, she's got a good voice. Mm. And so I'm like, that she would take that and she would use it for a purpose, I don't have to agree with purpose.
Right.
I'm not looking to cookie cutter a bunch of little kobolds.
Yeah, I mean, I think that her platform really is the body positivity.
It is.
Which then some people, I mean, they definitely don't like her platform because she's a big girl.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I mean, and she's
Yeah.
saying, like, I'm okay.
Yeah.
And I want you to think that you're okay too.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, so that's like the idea. Like, this just came up yesterday. I was then, since we're just bringing in body positivity, is that I heard an interview with Brendan Fraser, who is up for actor, whatever the role in The Whale.
Yeah. Oscar nominee.
Right, Oscar, yes. And I mean, and he's been nominated in the whole award season, but he was talking about this movie, which I haven't seen.
I have not either, but I've seen reviews and I've heard different things about it. Yeah.
So he apparently had, in this movie, he's a big man.
Huge.
Like
over 400 pounds, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
And was talking about how the way that we look at people who are overweight is like the people who are overweight are morally failed. Like, we look at them as moral failures. And that then because we view them as moral failures, that we're also overlooking them. So we don't think that they can contribute anything positive to society. Now, I know that that's it's a generalization of the thought, but he's saying, like, he, even before coming into this role, had to look himself in the mirror and to be able to say, what are things I have to overcome to even understand that I have overlooked people in the same way. And I think then bringing those two together and saying, all right, so there are people who are talking about body positivity and have then slammed Lizzo because they're like, she's not healthy because of her weight, her size. She's not healthy. So Lizzo talks about, hey, I hit the gym every day.
Huh.
Right? So she works out.
Wow.
I mean, so she does have, she has things within her diet that she's trying, I mean, like, she does focus on this. So, like, to be able to apply to her and say, well, like, really, let's talk about, I mean, and I've heard people say, like, let's just talk about how she wants to just ignore that she is unhealthy. Like, so they're already, like, here's the contribution. And that's where I saw these two really come together, is because you're looking at it and saying, I don't believe you. Like, you're actually not beautiful to my standard.
Yeah.
And so my standard, and this goes back to our puritanical,
right,
view of the world, is like, because it's not my standard, I'm going to say that you are unhealthy, and I'm not going to hear your body positivity towards this because I don't think it's true.
Yeah.
And so those two conversations, like because Lizzo has an HBO Max documentary.
Oh, okay.
And she brings in some of that there too about body positivity. And then when I was hearing him talk about this perspective, and it makes me want to go and watch the movie, but right now it's only in theaters, and
yeah,
I'm not rushing out still to go to the theater.
Right, exactly.
So, yeah. So when I'm those two conversations, bringing that in and really kind of seeing, I mean, my family has had, these issues, come up, body positivity, and what does that mean? And
yeah.
and so, like, so it does, like, it has affected.
Sure.
And that's where it's the same thing, whether it's, obese or, under, right? We still make claims on people's appearance.
Yeah.
And this, I think, leads to a lot of people having body issues.
Yeah.
so everybody's like, I'm not happy with my body.
Yeah.
And you're like, even these, like there might be, supermodels or model. I'm still not happy with my body. There's a standard for the model community that if you're not this, then you're not going to be in. There's that. And then you get like the, regular people, and they're like, yeah, I'm still not happy with my, with my weight, with my look, like, how do we find a place to get to? How can we, how can you still be happy with yourself and yet still say, like, for me, my midsection, grows. They call it beer bellies, right? But I mean, for men, we oftentimes that's where a lot of our weight gets attached.
Yeah.
Is right in our midsection, which is the whole thing. So how can you still say, all right, I'm going to be happy with myself.
I got a flat booty and a big belly.
Right.
I can't keep my pants up.
Right. So how can you be happy with it and still say I'm going to work towards something else, right? I mean,
I got my chest in my drawer syndrome. That's an oldie, but a goodie dad joke.
Yeah.
Well, to clarify, just so that everyone knows, Brandon Fraser played a 600-pound professor from the UK in the movie The Whale. And he gained 300 pounds to be able to play the role. And then an additional 150 to 200-pound suit
right.
To get him to the 600-pound portrayal.
Yeah, and he says he does not and will never use the word fat suit.
Oh.
Yeah, because of like the his portrayal there. He says that a lot of people still call it a fat suit. He still never used the word. He said, the suit that they call that.
Yeah.
Like he still won't ever call it that now. But
I mean, and I wasn't trying to be politically correct to call it a weight suit, but
but you were right in the terminology.
Just in that, I mean, I think that, I remember pre-COVID. I'd gotten a diagnosis of high blood pressure and dropped a bunch of weight and stuff. And at some point, people were like, "Hey, are you okay?" I'm like, "Well, I'm as not okay as I've always been."
It's a great answer.
And then, and then coming through pandemic. But this actually goes back to our last episode. And if our listeners haven't been to season 8, episode 2, really you should get in on that, because we talk about margin of how do we get okay with ourselves, and then is there a balance to that in becoming the best us that we can be, and how is that not necessarily attached to markers of what is success based on culture versus what does that mean within the parameter of having been created and what we can become. And so to your point, everybody's physiology is different. How and then as we concluded with the whole part, I'm like, well, maybe I'm just crabby because I'm decaying. And that came out of just a very brief study of wabi-sabi. Japanese philosophy, that you find beauty in the not perfect. Yeah. And so if perfection's your goal, then, that may be a redirection of consideration of really what should your goals be. And then all of a sudden you're in a corner and you're saying, but I feel judged. And maybe really how we're saying it is, we're saying, or is there another path to consider? But to your point about people judging, again, it's a sign of within humanity of tribalism, a dualistic mind of my idea about this is right, and and then you say, but what is absolute truth? Well, I mean, that is the question of, what are you basing the truth on? Are you basing the truth on something that has been told to you that is true? Is there other parts in the foundation of truth that you haven't uncovered or discovered yet? And then in that, what can you learn that you don't know? And we're the first people to jump on the bandwagon to say there's so much we don't know, that really we're just trying to stir up a process of how you're going to think about this, and is there a different way?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that, the conversation we bring circled back from last episode, and it does make sense. Like, so, even as we get older, like, are we comfortable with the way that our bodies are going to naturally get older with? Like, what our bodies are going to look different when we're older, obviously. I mean, hopefully everybody realizes that by now. Even though there are some people, as we can see, going back to the Grammy conversation, that are not comfortable growing old and looking old.
We actually had conversation about the different people who, like, based on their age. Actually, I just X'd out of my phone all of the different sections of the internet where I was asking it, how old is this person? How old is Bonnie Raitt? How old is, and, it was so interesting on the people who obviously had plastic surgery. I heard a conversation at church on Sunday, and somebody was like, yeah, I look a little bit older because I haven't had Botox in my in my eye wrinkles for a while and stuff. And I'm like, oh, you do that? I mean, like, I don't know. But that's the other thing is metabolism slow down.
Yeah.
Men, the older we get, we're not producing as much testosterone. That's why when people are like, how come my dad is so caring and loving? And it's because his estrogen level's up after the age of 60, and, and there, and then that gets into the other parts, the parts of the sciences where, like, there's ways for you to be able to find out what is going on. And, and so, but, it just is interesting.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to then the self-imposed, but also societal imposition of, like, image. And what's the image that we should maintain, and I don't know. I say societal, but I mean there are. I mean, and them doing the work on their faces and all kinds of stuff is then also setting a standard in which they are also putting out there. But that's also, I mean, there's a whole mix of it. But where else do you think, I mean, do you think it's just that some people are comfortable and some people aren't? I mean, and it looks, we say Hollywood, and Hollywood does do a lot to, I mean, because if you plan to work, then you need to look like it, right? I mean, like, I go back to Top Gun Maverick, right?
Yeah.
And
did you finally watch that?
I did.
Okay, what'd you think?
I did like it. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But I also look at, like, why didn't they bring in Kelly McGillis? Because she doesn't look like Tom Cruise at 60.
Right.
She's aged. And she hasn't done the medical procedures necessary in order to not look her age, right? I mean, so she's aged gracefully, but they didn't want that for that part.
Right.
So they brought in a younger actress. I mean, still not young. I mean, she's, I think, in her 40s. But what's her name? Jennifer Connelly?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then they brought her in. She's much younger, but then she's still trying to play the part like her and Tom Cruise are like the same age. Well, they're not.
So I pulled this up quickly. Yeah, Jennifer Connelly is 52 years old.
Oh, she is 50. Okay.
And so,
I was thinking she was in her 40s, but
Kelly McGillis is 65. And Tom Cruise is 60.
right.
So 52 to 60, that's 8 years. McGillis is 5 years older than Tom. Yeah, I mean, there's no question that, like, that was one of the things where I was like, oh, man, you wonder, it kind of would have been cool if they could have brought her back.
Right. I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, they didn't mind bringing back Iceman. What's his name?
Val Kilmer.
Val Kilmer, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and he's had his issues, of himself, but with the voice issues, right? He had what,
cancer.
Cancer of the larynx,
Yeah.
So, that's affected his speech, which then he didn't have to, speak very much during the film, other than I think he had one line.
Yeah, and it was definitely one of those things where they worked around
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Because they list Kelly McGillis in Top Gun Maverick, and I'm like, what? And it's like cameo archival footage. So somewhere.
So they may have brought her in for a shot, but then they cut it.
Well, no, footage from the original movie.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Got it.
Archival footage. Because they did the flashback of when Goose died and stuff like that.
Oh, right, and they're singing around the piano and Great Balls of Fire.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, I see what they're saying.
Yeah. And yet I think that there's, as much as Hollywood would focus on beautiful and, a stereotypical, I do think that there has been a major move in the last decade towards the oddly beautiful, like the non-stereotypical beauty in actors and actresses. And apparently, like, the politically correct thing is they're all actors.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a gender attached. And so...
So give me an example of the oddly beautiful that they were bringing in.
Well, she's a favorite of mine from Parks and Rec.
Yeah.
But you're getting me on the gun for because I don't remember people's names all.
Uh-huh.
Oh man. What is her name? I don't want all of this pop-up stuff.
Do you remember her character on Parks and Rec?
She's the black-haired
White woman.
Oh, Aubrey Plaza.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think her character on Parks and Rec is freaking hilarious. Mm-hmm. I love the dry-witted, sarcastic.
For sure.
Yeah. But, I mean, again, she's not probably in body form. She's not like an anti-Hollywood, she's thinner and, but still, even in that cast, the celebration of Jennifer Coolidge. Mm-hmm. Jennifer Coolidge isn't a typical body image cast in Hollywood.
Sure.
And I don't know. I just think that there's, I think that there's things that are happening. You see, and then you can get into, people of color and just the crossover things of what's going on with, introducing that stereotypically it doesn't have to be a white man, white woman, and so that's kind of where I'd go.
Yeah. I mean, and what you see, I think, sometimes, I mean, some of these indie films like The Whale, or last year's Oscar winner Coda was all about, the differently abled, the deaf folks. So it was a family that 3 of them were deaf, and they had a child who was not deaf.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like their story and how that played out. Good movie. If you haven't watched it, it's on Apple TV, Apple Plus or whatever they call it. So many pluses and minuses and maxes but Apple TV. So I think that there's that focus that they're trying to bring in some other views, right? Here, if you think about the stereotypical Hollywood couple, like they're going to be like some kind of image, right, that's going to maintain a standard of beauty. And I think that you're still going back to like, classic depictions of Hollywood couples that are kind of, perfect.
Yeah.
And what we do know is that there's nobody that's really perfect.
Right.
Ever,
it's true. Well, and that's why you shouldn't base your own reality based on what you're taking in.
Right.
I mean, there's a part of the trap can be that when you spend so much time suspending your reality, that your reality then becomes suspended. Mm-hmm. Like if you have to suspend reality to be able to get into the storyline to take in like what's going on.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's why then I would move into, I really enjoy the folk fantasy like stuff. Mm-hmm. I won't go through and watch The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings probably once every 2 to 3 years because, but still, I mean, like stuff that's like that, where, I mean, like there's so much costume going on. It's one of the reasons why I can enjoy Star Wars. It's cloak and dagger, and I mean, you got people are in different get-ups, and I do think on Disney Plus, that's one thing with them developing the chapters of prequel.
Yeah,
it's enjoyable, but it's not based on somebody's like typecast. Mm-hmm. I think a person, and it's ageism, but in 1923, Harrison Ford and
Helen
Mirren. Yeah, and I don't know. Ask me, what other movie she's played in. I know that she's a renowned actor, mm-hmm. but again, I mean, like the lady's got to be in her late 70s, early 80s, and she's not all made up and brought together so that she's a fabricated Liz Taylor. I mean, right. I think that's the best cultural counterpoint. I mean, between Michael Jackson and Liz Taylor, there was a plastic surgeon who was very rich.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just trying. She was born in 1945, so.
Yeah, which makes her 76 or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, so they say her most well known is she played the Queen in 2006. So.
Oh, and I've actually seen that movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, she's had an extensive movie career, but I think also she has done stage plays too. So.
Oh yeah, she's a Broadway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I think that you're right on those pieces too. Is like, I think that there is, and I think, I mean, even Taylor Sheridan, them bringing back some of like an aspect of Western, right? Western life, or, not like an actual Western movies or Western TV, but it has some of the elements of like like some of those early, I mean, like 1883 and 1923, and apparently there's going to be an 1883 kind of continuation.
Huh.
I think it's based on what's the black character guy, the one that was with Sam Elliott in 1883. It's kind of, I think it's continuation of his story.
Oh, really? Does
Yeah.
he end up becoming the black sheriff?
I think so, but and that's what I was trying. I mean, I've seen some pieces about it, but I
Okay.
don't know if it's fully developed.
All
But,
right.
yeah,
All right. Right on. Cool.
yeah.
Yeah. Actually, we've been watching Jesse Stone, the Tom Selleck back from
You mentioned
2005.
this, yeah.
And yeah, so we're 3 in, and it's kind of fun going back 25 years in television and taking. I watched some Columbo the other day,
Yeah.
which I don't really enjoy.
That's okay. Magnum PI. Have you gone back and watched Magnum PI?
It's available, but I have not.
Yeah.
And I'm not a Blue Bloods fan.
Yeah.
Like, I haven't watched that series or picked
Yeah,
up
I've
on.
never watched it.
Yeah, and so, but yeah, he handles this very, very well.
Yeah.
So,
So,
there we go. Yeah. So
So how does something become a standard by which we're shooting for?
huh?
You know, how does like we call beauty standards, body image standards, like how do they become a standard in the first place that people are actually trying to like chase after? You know, is it just because of influencers?
Well, I think a big part of that has to do with, you know, when it comes to Hollywood, is Hollywood producers and directors. I think if you go back to really the heartbreak, who was it that starred in The Wizard of Oz? Judy Garland.
Garland, yeah.
You know, there was a documentary on that and how they controlled her diet, you know, and I don't really know how much weight a camera really adds and stuff like that, but it seemed like it was one of those things where, you know, when I watched, it was the Bing Crosby Christmas movie.
White Christmas?
Yeah, White Christmas. You could tell that the dancer, one of the sisters, very malnourished. Just her body looked abnormally tiny in her waist and her thighs and stuff like that. Well, she was a professional dancer, and and again, to your point, I think that when it comes to modeling, again, there's, what we would consider natural parts of aging body and things like that. I mean, are just things that are other people see as flaws, whether that's dimpling of the skin or I don't know. People, it's weird. I don't think about it. I look in the mirror, I see the imperfections and stuff, but people are like, you have really good skin. I'm like, really?
There you go.
I don't know about that, and I'm like, I've got spots that are coming, but I know that my heart medication, it says you got to stay out of direct sunlight. So I, got to use sunscreen, and a lot of times you'll see me either during the winter in a stocking cap with it pulled down to my eyebrows, or wearing a trucker cap. And people are like, "Oh, you must really like hats." And I'm like, "Well, I like to wear a hat. That's fine, but a larger reason why I wear a hat is to protect my skin." And but I've seen other 56-year-olds walking down the street, and I'm like, you know what? I do have good skin.
Do have good.
And there's another thing that, for whatever reason, I mean, and I did my fair share of like tanning, not tanning beds,
Right.
but
But actually out in the sun.
oh my gosh, I wasted hours and days tanning. And, I think all of that stuff boiled down in recognizably, I mean, I have lived in the bucket of where I haven't had to fight the social culture of what's attractive or pretty. I mean, that sounds weird for me to say that out loud, but I also believe that I have a supernatural power.
Steve is a superhero.
I have an attractional energy that doesn't have to do with anything about me physically. And so it just, for whatever reason, I mean, and it's one of those things where I didn't do anything to get it. I did everything in my power not to exploit it, and I'm just sticking with it.
There you go.
So it is what it is. I mean, I've had people who see auras talk to me about my aura. I don't know what that is. But, try to be an encouragement, try to smile. It's amazing how many people don't smile in the grocery store. Yes. Now you understand that's the largest place of intersection with other humans that I have. So when I go to pick up some food and stuff like that. Yeah.
So maybe it comes down to like, that we've been talking about is like, how do, like, I'm trying to put this in the best way possible. Well, like
this is a weird way to land, but I think that we're not really being we're not being transparent if we don't address. I mean, like when we started the podcast, we talked about hey, we're two white guys that have grown up in privileged households that didn't have a lack for want of, when we went to college. I mean, it may have taken us a couple decades to pay off our college bills, but
still not done.
But we still went to college. Like it wasn't, it boiled down in our generation to just not if we could go, but when we pay off our bills, and still, and with that, and so there's an attractional part of, there's a winsomeness. I mean, I think that, here we are, and to the 7 or 8 listeners out there, sorry you're having to hear us muddle through this, but I mean, just the bottom line is, I mean, who established that?
Yeah. Well, and that's what I was getting to is really, like, how does somebody believe that they are somehow a gatekeeper, right? So somebody says, you're in, you're out. Like, you set a standard that's in my, like, why do we think that there needs to be a gatekeeper in the first place? And then why is it that we look at some people and say, like, you fit and you don't fit, right? So you're in, you're out. Like, we look at this and we're creating the systems that are keeping people disenfranchised. So we're, and we can say society, we can say culture, but there are definite gatekeepers out there, and we can say influencers, whatever, but they're definitely, you have to go through this channel in order to be in. And you can pick any different segment or slice of, whether it's even in, religious circles, denominational circles, there are gatekeepers. You come through this in order to be in. And if you don't come through this way, then you're going to be out. Like, why do we feel like we need gatekeepers to be able to tell us what's in and what's out?
Well, I don't know that there's a need to create that, except by the people who want the power to control that.
Right. So is power the issue?
Well, it boils down to power and control. I would go to probably the closest story would be the Hillsong documentary on Netflix. And it, when Hillsong New York started, I'm not sure that it was the first Hillsong church plant in the U.S. by the Australian church Hillsong. But, the thing is the pastor that was there and got things rolling and going, it was an everybody and everyone come as you are, we're family together. But then there was a shift. Mm-hmm. And then they had a section for special guests.
VIPs.
So then how does a church create a VIP section?
Mm-hmm. When you say come as you are.
Correct.
It doesn't meet your value or your standard then.
And where now security, which is not uncommon in our current culture, that churches have security. Not saying anything. I mean, there's plenty of shootings that are occurring through the doors of synagogues and churches. But when security is told, you can't let those people sit in VIP. So, like, when you're talking about gatekeeper, who becomes the gatekeeper?
Right.
Well, there is an advantage to leadership and the pocket of the church when there are people that are attracted who have lots of money that are created VIP statuses. Mm-hmm. Now, you and I both know one of the books of the Bible that Luther was not fond of, that this whole thing is addressed in the book of James, chapter 2.
Yeah.
And so, the bottom line is that I'm going to do an infinity point here, but I'm going to take us all the way back to the beginning again. In the regards to that, when we're talking about this, it's just backwards and upside down. And quite frankly, one of the best ways you can vote, one of the best ways you can show whether you approve or you don't approve, is use your feet, use your eyes, use your ears. If you identify something like that, where it's a doorkeeper kept power and control, don't contribute, don't participate. Doesn't mean that other people aren't going to, but you can at least live within yourself that you're not a participant.
Right.
So if you're anti-Amazon, don't order your shit and get it delivered from Amazon.
There you go.
You can't out of one side of your mouth say, well, I hate what Bezos has done with Amazon, and look what it's doing to small business. But boy,
still getting your Amazon delivery every day.
I'm glad the pizza cutter showed up.
Yeah.
Or even for your media. Like, there would be like this tumbling down effect. I went with Amazon because I could get free shipping. Literally the only reason why I first got my Amazon subscription.
Yeah.
Free shipping. And then I'm like, oh, I can listen to music. Oh, I can watch.
Store my photos.
I don't do that.
No,
I don't. That is not for Amazon to have my content. Not saying they do anything with my content. I'm just saying The answer is no.
Yeah.
But don't you think? We're coming back to that we need to exercise what we really believe is going on.
Go on. And I think that you're saying voting with your mouth, voting with your feet, voting. I mean, that, like, because those are the things that you're going to be able to follow through with, right? So you're saying, like, this matters. Well, then do that, right?
I had a friend that refused to watch after the big thing with Kevin Spacey came out about his sexual abuse with young boys and during the Me Too invasion.
Right.
Just flat out. I mean, and this friend, like, there were several Kevin Spacey movies that were their favorite.
Regular rotation.
Oh, yeah. But once that happened, I mean, built a bonfire and DVDs got thrown in. And I mean, now this person had experienced abuse. And so, but was very adamant about, no, I'm not going to take that in any longer because of that. You know, where do you draw the line?
Right.
You know, if we want to talk about, blood diamonds out of Africa, if we want to talk about really some of the largest disputes that are going to continue to occur is the mining of precious metals.
Right.
You know, you want to talk about Afghanistan and Iraq and Iran and about wars being about oil. Oil's only the tip of the iceberg of what this is about. Precious metals and mining and the ability to be able to rob the planet of herself, and everybody's like, hey, who pushed his granola switch?
But I think you're right, because, it's the same thing with everything. So you're looking at it like iPhone. It's the number one phone. I mean, it would be the standard. Now, I know that there are Android people out there right now that might be yelling like, well, Apple's dumb and here, like, but going back to, and it's the same people, we're talking environment, you're talking ethical issues. We have child labor that's happening in China based on these devices right here. Right?
And there was a day in my life that my answer would be, I want to hire children for labor too. I mean, like, and people are like, oh my God, what did Cole just say? I'm just saying, as a capitalist and a person pursuing and wanting to make lots of money, I'd be like, undocumented workers, well, hell yeah, let's hire everybody we can. Now, I believe in paying somebody a fair and living wage and not taking advantage, but on the backs of, basically it's an exploitation. But I still go down that road for those who are still stunned with what just came out of my mouth, back it up. I said there used to be a day. Right. In the evolution of Steve, that is not where I currently sit right now.
It does not reside there.
I am not going to make a trip to Indonesia and adopt 12 children to come and to do pottery in mass production so that I can make lots of money.
Right. Yeah. But it's the same concept when you're out there being outraged. Like, you can find everything. There's outrage for everything. Right? You have a phone.
So are we just
What's
people
the ethical standard?
Looking to just be angry all the time?
I think so.
Okay.
I mean, there's always something to be angry about, right? Yeah. And that's where sometimes you have to, like, pick your passion. Like, what is it that you're actually, I mean, because you look at the population of slavery, right? And whether it's sex slaves, whether it's employment slaves, like, we're still going back to this, and you're saying, all right, well, that's my saying. Well, that's like a really giant area for you to be able to, try to be able to jump out in front of. Like, you can't hit all of that because these giant corporations are using these people in they call, sweatshops back in the day. They're exploiting people. For sure, when you're looking at an American standard and you're saying we have child labor laws here that that prohibit the use of children to be able to be forced into labor.
Yeah.
Not every country does. And so what we're doing is saying, here's our standard. It should be applied to everyone. Hey, guess what? We've become now the gatekeeper. Now, I'm not for child forced labor.
Yeah.
Not for the selling of your children so that you can get some money. And like it's a whole system like this,
right.
The economic,
right.
I don't know how to unravel that.
Right.
I'm not for it, but I get I think we have to be careful that are we trying to then be the gatekeeper for the morality of the world? And where does the danger come in to be able to do that?
Well, and that goes back to a very fundamental premise that you and I have established of how we approach our natural life space. Mm-hmm. And that is in regards to we don't feel like that our position or place has been on a global platform. But we try to help and we try to act accordingly on our own path.
Right.
With the recognition, confession of being able to admit that there are parts of this flow that we've been trapped in or that we were on, and all we can do is be able to make decisions, in accordance on a daily basis going forward. And I think that's what we have, so yeah, we both have iPhones. Admittedly, you use yours to a greater capacity of its potential than I do. We
also, as everybody can see there, we both have Macs as well. So, it's also a part. So we can't
I will say that my Mac is from the year 2015.
Yeah, mine's only 4 years old.
Yeah.
So 5 years, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. And my other Mac's 2010.
Yeah.
So, when you start thinking about 8 and 12-year-old technology, I'm not getting a new MacBook Pro every year.
Right.
And,
But I think that's where you look at and where somebody then tries to step into a place of gatekeeping. Like, you're not innocent.
Oh, no, I'm not.
I'm not innocent.
I was at
I can't stand in a place of judgment of the entire world based on I'm not doing well. I can't tell you that I haven't. We are complicit. We are in the system of utilizing forced labor. And then you look at, yes, when we were involved in, with Amazon, we're Prime members too. And so then you're are you trying to tie in everything? And this is where and I'd say Christians, but it's everybody. You then say, I'm going to boycott Starbucks because of some statement that was mentioned by some CEO. I'm going to boycott Chick-fil-A because of some statement that was said by some CEO. I'm going to boycott Target. Okay.
I'm not going
Where does your list end? Because you could come up with there's everybody.
I'm not boycotting barbecue.
Right.
But there are barbecue places I don't go to.
There you go.
That's my point.
Right. It's the difficulty when you try to step into that place of saying I am the morality keeper for the world. Do you really want to be in that spot?
Yeah, no.
I don't want to set the standard for beauty because I'm not myself.
Although you are pretty.
Right. But I'm
Come
just
on,
saying,
can I get an amen, Heather? I know you love his blue eyes.
but I'm just saying, like, if I'm trying to be able to come to this place and say, I want to be the standard, well, I definitely don't look the standard.
Yeah.
Or whatever the standard is. Like, I say, hey, if beauty is going to be, the standard is going to be me, like, why?
Well, I mean, you're just saying you don't want to be that judge.
Yeah.
But what you don't
But on anything,
you don't
like,
have
do you
don't
want to
have
stand in that position?
Oh, no, but then the thing is that we don't have control about what other people make and how the standards have been set.
Yeah.
And there's some people that it matters. I mean, some people like, hey, if I didn't pay $3,000 for my pair of shoes, I mean, I'm just wearing junk. Really? Apparently that's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't get it. I mean, I do like nice footwear, but
But I mean, you also have had some of your boots for like
a decade.
That you've
Yeah.
retread and all kind. I mean,
don't tread on me. Hey, retread your shoes. Resold. It's true.
Resold,
Yeah,
yes.
because when they lose their soul, they need more soul.
yeah,
Yeah,
gotta have more soul in the shoes.
Yeah,
But I'm just,
I'm a
but that's
quality-
also, yeah. So, but you bought quality, but then also went back and said, instead of buying another quality, I'm going to reinvest.
Right. Yeah.
I'm going to look at this piece and say, how can I still bring the soul back to it versus like getting a brand new soul?
So, like, this is where when we talk about, can you find within yourself your evolution? I think sometimes when you're looking for a trajectory of what you will become, sometimes it's good to look back at what you were to be able to move forward. And to that point, I remember when the city of Knoxville introduced recycling. Not only did they say they wanted you to recycle, they charged you extra money for it. I just thought that was insane.
Yeah.
I'm like, what the F in vodka? I'm like, I'm already sorting my garbage for you. You should pick. This is garbage that doesn't cost me for garbage pickup.
Yeah.
But now you're saying you're going to give me another can. I have to sort it for you so it can go to the place where it needs to go. And you're charging me to do that. This seems like you're charging me more money for me to work. If you're looking for a soapbox, this goes to the whole point of how many places are moving to automated checkouts.
Self-checkout. Yeah.
Self-checkout.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, remember the day when bagging your own groceries was a big move?
Mm-hmm.
And now we're moving to a self-checkout? I'll know the apocalypse is happening when Aldi moves to self-checkouts. But, but now I'm the guy storing ripped out 2x4s from the renovation project in anticipation that I'll be able to use it for framework for the renovation on the third level. Why should I throw out good lumber where all I have to do is either pull the nails or saw the nails off, and then I can use that lumber for the purpose of putting up studs that, I mean, nobody's going to see the lumber. I don't get it. The thing I'm not looking forward to that project is hauling sheetrock up 2 flights of stairs. But,
Right.
We'll figure it out. I don't have to worry about that for at least another 12 months.
Yeah.
So,
You can wait.
yeah. But, I mean, that wouldn't have been me before. I would have, throw all this stuff out and go to Home Depot and start working with the new. But when you can revitalize something. And so my point about the shoes is that is why I'll spend more money for footwear, professional and casual, when it comes to a leather-based shoe I know that for literally less than 10% of the cost of the shoe, I can have soles and heels put on. And I go through heels twice as fast as I do soles. So, I mean, for $30, I can get new Vibram heels put on my boots. And I suppose I could get more mileage out of my shoes if I just didn't drag my heels.
Oh man! Yeah. All right. Well, I know that we're coming towards the end today of our episode, and there's a lot that's kind of thrown out, and and there's some things that are also not resolved. I think there's some frustration pieces, that comes out of like some standard. Somebody set a standard, somebody set a gate. And they want everybody to walk through that and do that because somehow they thought that was going to be the way. And I'm just thinking, like, how is it that we can still look at our process as individuals of walking in a direction that's also not going to say it's the standard? And still be, as we would look at it, just like we talked about at the last episode, about being okay with the imperfection. Being okay with something that's not the standard that's out there.
Well, and you and I have talked before, I use as an internal lipness about, I try to move in a direction that at least 30% of my life, I'm doing things I don't really want to do. Mm-hmm. And people are like, what? Where is he going with this? And what I would move into is how often in your relationships or how often in your interactions or how often there's a lovely lady at the grocery store I go to, and she's from a different country. I don't know what country she's from. She speaks a different language oftentimes, but she says hello in English. She is the slowest bagger of all of the employees. Mm-hmm. But when I walked into the grocery store 2 nights ago, and I came around the corner and she saw me, she smiled with her eyes. And at that time, I just said, hey, it's so good to see you. And she mimicked me back, good to see you too, with her broken English. Mm-hmm. And you know what? This lady isn't skinny. This lady isn't white. This lady doesn't have a $400 haircut, but there's beauty within this lady, and there's a dignity that's deserved in interaction. Mm-hmm. How she feels about herself, I can't control. But I don't have to be a person throwing wood on the fire and reinforcing how she may feel others make her feel. And if a smile and if an exchange of appreciation, what I make sure I don't do is when I'm looking for the lane to check out, I don't avoid her, even though I know she's going to take twice as long as anyone else to bag my groceries. And it's there where we interact together. Yeah. And that's not, do I really think that's changing the world? Globally, it's not changing the world, but it might be changing her world. Mm-hmm. Me and Duncan, my weathercaster. Oh man, that dude. And I think Duncan is probably on the spectrum at some level. But you know what? We chatted up. Then there's this other guy who calls me boss. And I feel really bad when a black man calls me boss. Mm-hmm. But he's always chopping it up with me. Always chopping it up. And, I'll come through And then there's some other regulars that it's just like when I come through, they're like, "Oh, tacos tonight, huh?" Like, good guess. And if it's not tonight, it'll be tomorrow. And if it's not tomorrow, it'll be for tomorrow's lunch.
Tacos are always what's for dinner.
But in those interactions, kind words and stuff, and so.
But that's what I think you're then implementing. So is a standard by which you want to.
And I go back to what I don't want to do versus,
what's easy to do would be keep your head down, don't look at anybody, don't interact with anybody.
And only interact with the attractional people, the people that you're attracted to or who are attracted to you. People make friends, and stuff like that. And, I guess where I'm even going with this, just to drag this out a little further, is that I think all people are weird and crazy and finicky, and maybe this is just some kind of like cynicism that has to ooze out of me, But the reality is that, it doesn't matter what your outside looks like. I've read that book before. It's like, I'm just wondering how many layers of the onion do you got to peel back until you find out what's really going on. And in there is struggling humanity with the flaws. It's all there.
And to bring this around full circle, not just from the episode, but from day one of the podcast, that's what we think about the unicorn. And that's where when we interact with people, that's what it's about. Like, there's something underneath. There's always something. I mean, and sometimes it's not always things that we'd be like, oh, I celebrate that. No, I don't want to. But, like, everybody's got that piece.
Yeah.
And for us to be able to ignore it, like, then we're just doing everything by some standard. But being able to say, yes, I'm going to now interact.
Yeah.
To be able to say, I want to show you respect and value.
Yeah.
By at least this small interaction. That's my goal.
And so there's the value of Lizzo using her voice for what she wants to use her voice for. It's you take a look at Lizzo and you put Lizzo next to Brandi Carlile. What determines the standard of who's cool and who's not?
Yeah.
And yet here are two forces of humanity that are at work to not only distribute through sales, but to create on a platform that they're comfortable with. And I just don't know of a prophetic voice. Well, but they still hang out and are friends too. But there's the attractional force. I think Avett Brothers probably have a very similar prophetic voice in music. And maybe what we're discovering, this is a thought that just occurred. You have the prophetic, the foretelling, but then you also have the person who declares and becomes a voice for the unheard. So I think Lizzo uses her platform to be the voice for people who don't have the voice to say, this is okay, this is acceptable, this is, the unlovely are lovable. Where Brandi Carlile's way through music is more declaring, this is what's wrong with society, this is what's gone on within me, this is what we should push for, this is the love that I have for children, my children, this is, and Avett Brothers' condemning album, of what was going on within our society in the United States. I mean, they do very similar prophetic but then how people use their voices for the unheard voice. Yeah.
Yeah, so consider how you're using yours.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. How are you using your voice? Do you stand up for someone who doesn't have the ability to stand up for themselves? Do you treat someone who may be perceived as undignified with dignity? Are you going to follow the cool group, be the cool person? You know, I was in Benny's the other day, and the guy looked at me and goes, "Hey, I think I saw you on an advertisement." I'm like, his name's Greg. I decided like I'd start reading name tags and calling people by their name, and so I'm like, Greg. He goes, I should know your name. I'm like, well, my name's Steve. Well, I got a friend named Steve.
I should know your name.
And so
I wish I could wear a name tag too.
So Greg, he was just starting his beard, and I come around the corner, and then him and his manager buddy were like, "No, Greg, like that dude has a beard." He goes, "You know what? I saw a guy that looked just like you on a commercial. I don't know if it was a Heineken commercial or not." And I said, "Well, hey, if anybody asks, I'm willing to be on a commercial."
But not drink Heineken.
That's so true.
Hashtag never a sponsor.
Oh, man, not acceptable. Even if they approached us with $1 million, we would still say no. That part is true. But yeah, so then the guy's like, it wasn't a Heineken advertisement. He probably saw your face down at the post office. And I was like, actually, I resemble that. And I walked out the door.
Left him guessing.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, everybody. Things to consider today. It was longer conversation today than last episode, but lots to consider.
Well, we're giving you a 2 weeks dose.
Right.
Yeah, in 1 week.
Right.
And so, because I'll be out of country. Because in less than 48 hours,
on a jet plane.
I'm leaving on a jet plane. I'm not. But see, then that's how I know. Like, do you know what a pain in the butt it is to get ready to be gone for 8 days?
Right. Internationally?
With wearing 3 hats. Leading worship, working on a work crew, physical labor, Emmanuel labor. God with us. And then technology.
Yeah.
So shooting pictures and recording video.
You get a lot.
I get to do that in 50 pounds or less.
Yay.
Or I could pay for another bag.
Right.
But I'm going to try to do it for.
Yeah. You're going to try to squeak it under
49.97. That's what I'm going to try to do. So anyway, I'm going to Dominican Republic on mission trip. If you know who I am, you can follow that on, probably it's going to be Facebook mostly, which would be probably, my Facebook friends are like, oh, cool. So the only thing you're going to talk about isn't the podcast.
It's either Cut Daisies or now Mission Trip.
Yep, there you go. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So thanks a lot, everybody, for listening into our. It was an infinity of where is this conversation going, but we got there.
We did.
All right,
we got it. We landed. All right, everybody, have a good week, and bless you, Steve.
Oh man, thank you for the blessing, Phil.
We'll see you.
Don't lock the door on that gate.
Two
you
weeks.
can be the gatekeeper of blessings.
Yeah,
just keep them flowing, baby.
Blessings. Oh boy. All right, so 2 weeks. No episode next week, but we'll probably also bring that up in the trailer. So you've already watched that before this. So,
and if you haven't, then you missed out because we're going to talk about other stuff too.
Right.
Peace.